Today, we're going to be looking at what a war between the USA and Russia would look like. Keep in mind that this scenario is completely fictional, and I don't see this happening anytime soon. Some events may take place in this scenario which would be unrealistic and fictional, so just want to put that out there that this is in fact fictional. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and let's jump right into it. In these scenarios, the attacker is represented by the color red, and the defender is represented by the color blue. So we start off with the Russian cyber attacks on the US. There is a lot more of them, and they just keep coming, and it is found out that the Russian government is involved in it, and they are sabotaging companies and businesses around the US. The US and many other countries sanction Russia, which in turn kind of messes with the economy a little bit, and tensions between the two countries rise a lot. The leaders of the two countries meet and cannot decide on how they want to settle this and go home without having any progress made on the two countries' relations. At this point, it is kind of like a Cold War scenario. The two countries are spying on each other, and an American jet is shot down over Russia. Now, this might be far-fetched, but this does lead the United States to declare war on Russia. At this point, other countries are panicking. The United States has just declared war on Russia, which means there's going to be a lot going on. Russia and the United States, big superpowers in the world, so the other countries are worried about the outcome. Right off the bat, there's a non-nuclear agreement that is signed. The United States and Russia both vow not to use nuclear weapons in this war. Now, Japan and South Korea are being used by the United States for military bases, naval ports, and stuff like that. They're using it for the Air Force. So the US has the advantage in the Pacific. The United States also has military bases all over Europe in NATO member states, so Russia is most likely going to be on the defensive in this scenario. Now, Russia knows that the United States is using the military bases in Japan and would like to keep its west coast secure, so Russia declares war on Japan and South Korea. Once again, this might seem far-fetched, but this is once again fictional, and this is just a what-if kind of question. I'm also going to be following this along, and I'm going to be recoloring countries and stuff to show what Russia has occupied. So the lighter color is what is occupied by that country of the color. So immediately the Russian military starts moving into northern Japan and takes this entire island. With Russia's occupation of northern Japan, as well as their declaration of war on Japan and South Korea, the United States' closest allies join the war on their side. Those countries include Canada, the UK, and France. At this time, Russia starts a small military campaign pushing a little bit into northern Japan, but not getting very far, before getting stopped by Japanese troops. Russia's close allies, such as Belarus and Kazakhstan, join the war on Russia's side in order to back them up. At this time, the US is still mobilizing, so their troops are not ready, as well as Canada, the UK, and France, their troops aren't ready either. So really, it's just Russia versus Japan at this point. Russia has a large amount of their military stationed in Japan at the moment, so they continue their push downwards into Japan. At this point, Russia's main goal is to wipe out Japan and South Korea and start playing on the defensive. Russia also manages to get Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan to join the war on their side in order to help them out. Russia's offense in Japan continues, and a campaign is sent south in order to take Tokyo. At this time, the US Army is basically mobilized and starts sending troops into Japan in time for the Battle of Tokyo. Unfortunately, only a small number of American divisions managed to make it in time, and Tokyo is lost to Russia. With this, the Russians push through the rest of Japan pretty easily, and Japan surrenders to Russia. At this point, Russia takes the defensive side and even starts communications with China and North Korea to see if they would be willing to join the war on their side. China states that it does not want to join the war, but will send supplies over to Russia, while North Korea opts into the war and starts their invasion of South Korea. North Korea's army blazes through South Korea. Since most of South Korea's army was over in Japan when the invasion took place, Seoul is captured and South Korea falls pretty quickly. Germany, which is a really close ally to the United States, decides to join the war in order to help the US out. The European countries gather their navies and take over Kaliningrad. At this point, the United States, Canada, and the UK start sending their troops over into the Pacific in order to retake South Korea and Japan. Meanwhile, France and Germany set up their navies in the Baltic Sea in order to stop any supplies from going into Russia. The American alliance decides that it wants to make a small landing on the island of Kyushu, and does so successfully. With this, the troops start pushing up with a poorly defended island. The Russian armies here retreat back to the other islands, and the whole island is under American control. With this, the American alliance has a foothold in Eastern Asia and begins to retake all of Japan. They successfully start to push up. They greatly outnumber the Russian military that is occupying Japan, and manage to retake Tokyo. Russia orders some of its army to form a defensive line right about here, and the Americans push up right to it. At this point, the Battle of Sendai takes place. It is known as one of the bloodiest battles of the war, and it ends with an American victory. After this defeat, the Americans managed to push up, blocking off supplies to some of the Russian defensives, which retreat back, and the Americans managed to take over all of mainland Japan. After taking the main island of Japan, the Allies move up and manage to take over the northern island right here. With this, the Allies look over and start to plan an invasion of South Korea. At this point, Germany and France start sending their troops over to the Pacific, and a landing in Busan is made, which results in an American victory. The North Korean army, which is poorly equipped and poorly trained, is really no match to the American alliance, as they managed to push up through South Korea. In order to stop a repeat of the Korean War, the United States president meets with China. In this briefing, the United States president states that it will not continue invading into China. The reason this happened is because of the Korean War. If you don't know, in the Korean War, the United States and its allies manages to basically invade all of North Korea until China joins the war in fear of the American alliance invading into them. Like I said, in this briefing, the United States makes a deal with China saying that they will not continue the invading, and the continued invasion of South Korea happens. Like I said, the North Korean army is greatly outnumbered, outsupplied, and the equipment is old. Seoul is taking, and most of North Korea's occupation of South Korea is invaded by the American alliance. Now the invasion of North Korea begins, with the American alliance pushing into North Korea pretty easily. The Russians do not send much of their military down to defend North Korea. Instead, they are defending their border and ports up here. Pyongyang is captured, and the American alliance pushes through the rest of North Korea, pretty much taking all of it really easily, and meeting a small Russian army up here in northern North Korea. At this time, a British and French army manages to start an invasion of the Russian island of Sakhalin. The invasion is successful, and they manage to start pushing up into the Russian island. A little after this happens, the American alliance manages to break through right here and starts pushing into Russia. The entirety of this island falls, and the American alliance makes big gains down here in southern Russia. When it comes to defending these cities, the Russians manage to push back a lot, and the Americans are basically pushed out of all of their gains they have made. The Russian army manages to cut off the Americans in this top part over here, and the army over here is completely destroyed. Now the Russians start pushing back into North Korea. At this point in the war, Poland joins in order to open up a new front for Russia, and the American alliance begins to push into Belarus. They make lots of gains really fast, since Russia's army is pretty much all over the place at this point. Half of it is over in the west, and the other half is over here defending the major cities in Russia. Belarus, on the other hand, was completely unprepared for the invasion, and Minsk is captured pretty quickly. With this new front opened up, Russia starts sending troops from the west over to the east in order to protect Moscow and other major cities. The Americans use this to their advantage and start pushing back up into Russia. Major land gains are starting to be made, and the island up here is completely reconquered. This is what our current map looks like. We have the US, Canada, France, the UK, Germany, Poland, South Korea, and Japan on one side, and Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and I think I'm missing one. Did I say Uzbekistan? I don't know. They all sound the same, but former Soviet states helping out Russia. We have the American alliance taking over Kaliningrad, half of Belarus, and most of western Russia over here, as well as completely occupying North Korea. So the American alliance at this point is making very large gains in Russia. This land over here is largely frozen and is being led by the Canadian divisions. An Alaskan division manages to make a landing on this peninsula and takes over the entire thing. And lots of this land starts falling pretty fast, with most of the coastline being gone. The Americans managed to create a front that looks something like this. Meanwhile, in the west, the Russians managed to push back the Americans out of Belarus and even start a little campaign into Poland. This is mostly because France, Germany, and the UK have most of the troops over in the east, so this area is largely undefended. This is seen as one of the biggest flaws in the American alliance's strategy, which initially was to have Poland join the war and push into Russia. They didn't even think about the troops that were still over in eastern Russia. France and Germany pull back all of their troops out of the east and start pushing back into Poland, while Canada and the UK send most of the troops over to the east, and the United States sends half of its troops to the east and half of its troops to the west. Another campaign through Belarus takes place, with Minsk being captured again, and most of Belarus being captured, and eventually they surrender. Over here, small gains are being made, but Russia is so vast and cold over here that the gains are pretty much useless and don't really do much for the American alliance. The countries then start focusing more on the Western Front and start a push into Russia. They swoop around Ukraine and manage to take back lots of lands over there and even capture St. Petersburg. A large Russian counteroffensive takes place, It is also their last counteroffensive, and they managed to push back the Americans quite a bit, almost to the borders of Belarus. But at this point, Russia is completely drained of resources, they don't have much supplies left, and people are going hungry. The American alliances managed to push through Russia and cut off the northern area over here. Just before the American alliance manages to enter Moscow, Russia sends out terms of surrender. And at this point, the war is over. The American alliance is victorious and Russia surrenders over to them. When looking at a peace treaty, this is probably what it would look like. We have South Korea taking over all of North Korea and forming a united Korea. We have Japan taking back the island up here. And we have the United States making a new territory over here in eastern Russia. In Europe, we have Poland taking over Kaliningrad and a little bit of Belarus. As for the Central Asian countries, nothing happens to them as they had little role in the war. And that is going to do it for my scenario in which the United States and Russia go to war. Like I said, this is completely fictional and I never really see this happening. If you guys have any suggestions, make sure to leave them in the comments below. I will most likely end up doing them. And yeah, so don't be afraid to leave your suggestions in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And I will see you in the next video.